First and foremost, I also wanted to thank you. I'm grateful for the PSIA-AASI, but I'm grateful for you all. I addressed the Alpine side of PSA earlier this year, and you fill a very important role in our industry, and I just wanted you to know that I appreciate you. Along those lines, we also are a supporter of the PSIA-AASI, and you have a very deep discount on Toko products that you can access through the PSIA member benefits website. So it's a very, very deep discount. Is everyone aware of that? Is anyone not aware of that discount? Okay, good, super. So I mean, a little bit about me. I was on the U.S. ski team for quite a few years through cross-country skiing. I grew up alpine racing and cross-country racing, but I was in the U.S. ski team for 5 years, switched to biathlon, made the Olympic team, World Championship team, later won World Masters and many of the local marathons and events. So I've got a passion for skiing, but also Nordic skiing, and I've been doing it for my whole life. And I got into waxing through waxing my own skis as an athlete and seeing how important it was, and then started working for Toko and a ski company as well, and then took it from there. So since 2000, I've been the brand manager for Toko and also been the head tech for Toko in the United States since 2000. I wanted to speak a little bit about the Toko brand, so you have an idea of who we are and what our personality and identity is, and then we'll go into all the different aspects of waxing. So just a little bit about Toko. We're a Swiss brand. We've been based in Altstetten, Switzerland since 1916, long time. Altstetten, Switzerland's in the northeast part near the Lake Constance, where the Von Trapp family came over in the Von Trapps. So that's about where we are, next to Liechtenstein. We're part of the Brav sports group. That's a Norwegian-based sports group, but we are a Swiss brand. Other brands in that group include Swix, Lundhags, Halsport, Ulvang, and Skispora, which is like a ski grooming tracking software. I work directly for Brav in Switzerland, which is in Altstetten, Switzerland. Toko is a U.S. ski team sponsor, a sponsor of the PSIA, of tons of events and organizations. I take pride in contributing as much as we can, or I can, both to individuals. I really enjoy helping people learn and have a positive experience, waxing, skiing, whatever on their own terms, but also we have supported pretty much every single U.S. ski team athlete at one point or another in their career since when I started working for Toko, which is 2000. Pretty much every single one of them, which is pretty interesting if you think about it. So, I mentioned Swix. We're both in the same group. We have the Brav Sports Group has a two-brand strategy when it comes to Toko and Swix. Toko is completely dominant in the Alps. We have about 90% market share in the Alps, Switzerland, Austria, Germany. And Swix is stronger in the Nordic countries. And for that reason, it also makes sense, but there's also a very strong philosophical difference between the brands. So I wanted to just mention a few things about what Toko is and what we stand for. The first is innovation. Toko has innovated almost every single breakthrough in technology or development in ski waxing for the last 40, 50 years. Almost every single one of them. Sounds kind of unbelievable. We were the first ones with a dedicated waxing iron. We were the first ones to use Molly. We were the first ones in our glide wax. We were the first ones to have a fluorinated glide wax, which I know now is, but at the time it was a big deal. We were the first ones to abandon fluorine in kick waxes. We were the first ones to introduce products such as, we now have Jet Liquid, which is the first post-fluorinated top coat, both in powder form and in liquid form. So we're very innovative. There's many more, like for example, our kick waxes come in screw-up tops, which is very innovative. Per each wax, so this would be, for example, base performance glide wax, hot wax. We only have 3 colors, yellow, red, and blue. Yellow for warm, red for just below freezing, blue for cold. That in itself is the simplicity of talking about, because it costs less money to buy into. It's a lot easier to learn the nuances. There are a lot of nuances in the Toko line. It's a lot easier to learn those nuances. And if something is between the two colors, you just mix them. It's really simple. So simplicity is a big one. Performance, so the simplicity is not at the cost of performance. I was told by a person who was waxing the overall World Cup winner last winter that they used our Jet products, which I have a couple here, test products. They used our Jet products in almost every single race last year. At World Juniors last year, when they got back, I got calls from 8 different coaches out of the 9 who I believe were there, trying to order those same products because we won every single wax test. So it's not at the cost of performance. And the last aspect of what we stand for is service. I don't know if you're familiar with the e-blast that we send out. I hope that, my understanding is most people that receive them are grateful for them and really enjoy the content, which I try to put out to educate and to serve, how to make things simple. About 100 YouTube videos on how to, also on products. If someone's got a question, they can comment on any video and I'll get an alert and I'll answer that question. If someone wants to ask me a question, not per video, but otherwise, you can reply to any one of those e-blasts and I'll answer your question, or you can email me directly using my email address, which is ian.harvey@brov.com, and I'll answer your questions. There aren't too many people in the industry who are willing to do that or able to do that the way I can. Fun fact, I mentioned Toko was established in 1916. In 1932, it split into 2 companies. One is the Tobler Company, and one is Toko, which is Tobler Company. Toko, that's where Toko came from. So the company, the original company, Toko, which was Tobler Company, is the same company that eventually made Toblerone chocolate bars. It's the same mother source, which I thought you might appreciate.
Does that mean that there are Toblerone chocolate bars in our backpack?
It does not mean that.
Can we get the word pro?
Okay, so now we're getting into waxing. Waxing can be very intimidating, but if you look at it from a different perspective, maybe not as bad. If you just look at this, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so much. You have liquids, powders, more liquids, but different from these liquids, hot waxes, natural waxes, liquid express waxes, you have pastes. It's very complicated. We also have the opportunity to apply wax with merino roller in solid form. So it's very complicated, but what we're trying to do in general is accommodate all types of skiers. So we have the express wax line for easy waxing. We have all-in-one and natural waxes for the people that have a passion for that. These are also entry-level waxes, which are super effective. And then we have the highest end racing. We also have, in terms of investment in time, we have some very quick waxes. So any one of these waxes is not necessarily applicable to everybody, of course. So it's not like anyone's trying to sell you on anything or to suggest that all these waxes are important to anybody. Not even probably a third of them are important to anybody. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. If you were to ask me a very important question, that would be, what wax do I recommend for a passionate recreational skier? Someone who works and goes skiing after work and doesn't have a lot of time. Someone who loves having very fast skis but doesn't want to invest a lot of time into it. And who doesn't want to spend a lot of money on that wax. I would say that Base Performance Blue for the Intermountain Corridor of the United States, so all these dry, high mountain valleys, this is the best wax we've ever made in terms of your value for the performance. Base Performance Liquid Paraffin Blue. If I'm not testing, which I test constantly, but if I'm not testing, I'm using this 95% of the time. I live in Utah, but I ski all over around here. Between November and mid-February, I'm using this 95% of the time. It's fantastic. Base Performance Liquid Paraffin Blue. So you might find that interesting.
And that's a glide wax.
It's a glide wax. Yep. Alpine, Nordic, everything. It's a liquid paraffin glide wax. I'll show you how to apply it. the ski has been cleaned or brushed out, or it's in decent shape. This is what you do, and this is how much you put on. You can see, for the most part, the base is wet. That might be a shade too little, but for the most part, the base is wet. But what I want to avoid is having it drip. If it's dripping, you put too much on, and that is both a waste of money and it's slower. It is slower. If you put it on, so it's a mist, and you can tell that it was wet, but it's not enough to drip, that's perfect. That's the perfect application. So you don't need it that much. You need less than pretty much everyone puts on, and it also takes less to dry. There's another aspect of the liquid paraffins that I want to mention. I should also say all liquid paraffins are not the same. Some liquid paraffins in the market have acetone in them. It's a hardener, it's a ceramic hardener. And in one way, they're better in that they dry faster, which is convenient. And it works also for someone who's racing and waxing right before the race. We chose to have our products perform very well, but also one of our mottos is or philosophies is to stay clean in terms of environmental friendliness and also the friendliness to the user, the waxer. So we don't have that hardener in here, and so it takes longer for it to dry and cure. What I generally do is I put it on the day before. So let's say I'm skiing today and I'm skiing tomorrow. I'll come back from my ski today, brush the ski up, wipe it clean, spray that on, and then put my skis up. And then the next day when I go skiing, I take them out. I might brush them or I might not, depending on the conditions, and then I just go ski on them. So it's not inconvenient. Yes, please.
I love that product. I use it regularly, but I have questions, I guess, about that. I frequently will wax in the morning before I go, so 30 minutes before, an hour before. Am I shorting myself? And secondarily, what type of durability do you expect out of it? Because it doesn't last as long as I do.
You're putting it on half an hour before you ski.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, just 1 second, please. Okay, so to answer those questions, then I'll call on you. To answer those questions, first, I gave 6 cans of this to your group that hopefully you've been using. No?
Somebody else.
So a lot faster than us.
Your coaches have the opportunities to give them to you.
Okay.
Every opportunity in the evenings to do it, to have this 24-hour turnaround.
In any case, the recommendation is to put it on when you get back. Brush, clean, whatever you gotta do, it only takes a second, and then spray them like a shot and then put them up. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that, I don't believe. But what my recommendation, just 1 second, please. My recommendation, I don't know how this works. Could somebody help me out? No. Somebody help me out. I can't see what I'm doing.
I don't have my readers on. I can't see.
Okay, you got it? No. So what I generally recommend is, if you think about the conditions, thank you. If you think about the conditions, when it's cold and dry like this morning, for example, it's important for the wax to be harder on the ski. You want to harden things such that it's more abrasion resistant. When the snow is wetter and warmer, then it needs to be hydrophobic. These waxes are different, but also the drying time that you let the waxes dry has a different effect. And another thing to think about is in the Alps, where Toko's made, the snow is different. Even if the snow temperature and the humidity is the same, the snow is different than it is in the Intermountain quarter of the Rocky Mountain in the West. It's different. It's far more dry, abrasive, less moisture, etc. And so that's another thing. On the bottle, it says let it dry for 30 minutes. Those of you that have received e-blast and seen the video have heard me say overnight is best for blue. For red, you can do it overnight and it's great, but 2 hours is also great. And for the yellow, the less it sits, the more hydrophobic it is. So if it's yellow and it's dirty snow in the spring, I personally like to let it sit overnight because the dirt is the real bugger, much more than the water. So I let it sit overnight because I want it to be harder and less greasy and hydrophobic, which means kind of oily or whatever. But if it's clean snow, then I'll put it on. If we've had sprint races, I'll put it on right at the start of a sprint race and they'll ski on it wet. And it's very, very good. But if you're going to go for a ski, let it dry for a half an hour, and it's more hydrophobic than it is if you let it sit overnight. So you can manipulate the property of the wax by the drying time. I always let blue sit overnight because I want it, if I'm using blue around here especially, I want it to be hard. I might have left something. Well, the durability. I had 2 questions. Durability, my opinion is if applied the way I just described, it's as durable as a hot wax. So durability depends greatly on the abrasiveness of the snow. So that's why I don't say Ks, because just like if you were to be putting on even a blue hot wax and you applied it properly, you could have white bases after 10 Ks if it's super abrasive. Whereas if it's new falling or falling snow and around closer to freezing, you can probably ski on 100 Ks before you're getting any visible abrasion. So I would say it's comparable to hot wax in terms of its durability if applied correctly. Okay, so we had a question here.
What do you recommend for Sierra cement?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
For the Sierras,
For the Sierras, you're looking at one of these two.
those two?
For the Sierras, where you have much more moisture, much more new fallen snow. That new fallen snow has much more moisture. The moisture doesn't drain, it's wet. The familiar phrase is Sierra cement. And in that case, you want to go with the red or the blue, depending on how much moisture the snow has in it. Yes, please.
Has Toko experimented with maybe a pump spray? Because I've had a lot of failures of red, blue, yellow.
We've had some failures, not so many. I've found that in my experience is the failures that we've had has been in bottles that have frozen consistently. So if you leave it in a freezing garage or in a car, you might have problems compared to if you left it in a house. So that's I believe that's the cause and effect that I've noticed, the trend. But if you have a problem, I'll replace the product. So just shoot me an email. But that's the trend. But we had a couple of batches that I think froze somewhere. And so I'd send a dealer a 6-pack and all 6 would be bad. But then if I look at the entire year and we sold, let's say 4,000 units of it, we had like 100 bad. And I can live with that because it seemed like those hundreds all were in the same batch and the same shipment. Maybe something froze, I don't know. Okay, yes, please.
Just had a question. We saw you put it on with super easy. What was on your base already? Like what do you need to do prior to putting this on?
In this case, I had Base Performance Blue on that was scraped and brushed. And generally speaking, when I'm using the liquid paraffins, if I'm using the blue, I'll use blue. But otherwise, I always use one color colder. So if I'm using red, I use blue underneath. And if I'm using yellow, I'll use red underneath. And you don't need to hot wax every time you use liquid paraffin. This depends more on your standard. You can have super fast skis with 0 hot wax in your base. Super fast using this. The hot wax doesn't really affect the performance of the ski the day you're skiing when you're using liquid paraffin. It's more about the health, long-term health of your bases. If you only use liquid paraffin, let's say for a month, you just spray the liquid paraffin on and every day you use liquid paraffin, you ski, your skis are probably going to continue for the entire month to be quite fast. But you'll see a deterioration in your base. It'll get whiter and whiter and drier and eventually more abraded, chalky. And it's almost like your skis aren't being waxed, and that's because there's no wax in your skis. These skis, decent skis, have sintered bases. Sintered base basically means they accept and absorb wax, much like a sponge on a funky micro level. Sintered bases have been ground up in a powder, pressed, and then peeled into a base form again, such that there's space in the bases, and when the bases are heated, they expand and can accept hot wax. So when we hot wax, we change the properties of the base. When we hot wax, we're not leaving wax on the surface of the ski to interact with the snow, like we do when we're spraying liquid paraffin, for example. When we hot wax, ideally, you melt it into the base. You let it cool, you scrape and brush it off the base such that there's basically no wax left on the base, and you're changing the property of the base. So when you're hot waxing a base with blue, you are making the base harder than it was because the blue wax is harder than the base material, and you're making it more abrasion and dry friction resistant, which are challenges you would find in cold, dry, maybe refrozen or new fallen snow. Obviously, it's the opposite when you wax with yellow. You're making the base softer and more hydrophobic or water repellent. So you're changing the properties of the base by impregnating the base with something that has distinctly different properties. We're manipulating them.
Question.
Yes.
So if you have a base that's impregnated with blue.
Yep.
And then you hot wax it with yellow, is that going to be the same as if you hadn't had the blue underneath it? I mean, in other words, do you have this effect, sandwich that affects the last layer you put on?
So generally speaking, there's a displacement that happens. Not necessarily a micro layering, what a lot of people think, but there is a little element of that. But for the most part, the way I consider this to be important is if the conditions change massively. So for example, for me, the more difficult one is if it's been warm all week and then we get a cold snap and you've been waxing with yellow all week, you need to harden your base. So you need to displace, it's not just waxing one time with blue, that won't do it because you need to displace the yellow that was in your base with blue. So you melt the blue on after brushing your bases out, melt the blue on, let it cool, scrape it and brush it, and then I would, if it's quite cold and you want to have especially good skis, I would melt the blue on again because you're displacing the yellow and truly changing the properties of the base. Yes, please.
You mentioned brushing a couple times. Will you just share the difference between a brush that cleans the ski when they finish versus a brush that you're going to use after you spray on the liquid?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about brush selection then now, and I'll cover, I think, everything you're interested in. So we actually make 6 different brushes. I'll put some of them up here and then show them. We make 6 different brushes. I use 3 different brushes. So we make 6, I use 3. And I'm recommending you use 3 if you're really interested in having super skis. If you're not super interested in having good skis, I would use 1. The 1 is the copper brush. This is our best-selling brush and it's our utility brush and our most effective hand brush. So the way I would use this brush is I went for a ski and I'm coming back and I want to hot wax. I use this brush after I ski and before I wax. I brush my base out to get rid of dirt that's in the base and to open up the base, like open up the structure. You get stuff sticking to it and whatnot. So it's to open up the base and to clean it. That's the first brush I use. And then regardless of what color wax I'm waxing with, after I've hot waxed and I let it cool, thank you, and scraped, I'm using the copper brush again. Regardless of what color wax it was, if it was a hot wax, after I scraped, after it lets cool, then I use the copper brush again. So as you can see, this is a very important brush. So for those who are interested in having good skis, but not interested in having 3 brushes, that's your brush right there. The next step would be, if I'm waxing with either yellow or red, those are the 2 softer waxes, after I use the copper brush, I'll brush out with a nylon polishing brush. The nylon polishing brush is eventually, next year, this is going to turn blue. We're going to make this blue to differentiate it from there are many words for this other brush that's been around forever, all-purpose nylon, general-purpose nylon brush. It looks very similar, but the bristles are white, and they're stiffer and thicker. They're fatter. So these bristles, I would say, are about 1/4 the diameter of the all-purpose white nylon brush. That means when I'm brushing in the structure, it's getting into the structure for red and yellow. Red and yellow. The problem I have with the all-purpose white nylon brush is the bristles, and that's the bristles that's on this part here. The bristles are far fatter, and it's kind of like this is your structure in your ski, and this is the white nylon all-purpose bristles. You can't, it's not going to make it into the structure because the bristles are so fat, and you can brush with that white all-purpose nylon brush. You can't over-brush with it. You can brush with it for half an hour, and you're not getting any wax out. And with this very soft, fine brush, you can take one pass and a whole bunch of wax comes out because it's reaching a part of the base that the fat one's not getting to. You can remove wax from the base using this, but you already did it with this one. So for me, it's a brush that I don't recommend, but we sell a ton of them. So we continue to have it in the line. Another brush that I'll go to my recommendations, I'll revisit that again. And so the other brush would be, if I'm using blue, I let it cool, I scrape, I use the copper brush as I mentioned, then I'm gonna finish it with a horsehair brush. So the white nylon polishing brush for red and yellow, and the horsehair for blue. Why the horsehair instead of this one? They actually have bristles that are of a similar diameter. They're both very fine, but the blue is far stiffer. It removes wax far more aggressively than this one. And when there's a little bit of moisture in the snow or more moisture in the snow, it's usually not a bad thing to have that kind of a sheen on your hydrophobic sheen on your base, which this will leave. But when it's really cold like it was this morning, it's good to remove every bit of wax from the surface of your ski to expose that fine, flat structure that you have in cold snow. And a lot of people, for example, will even go to the length of taking the skis and putting them outside so the base contracts and pushes out a little bit more of that white wax, which you'll see when you take it outside, and then brush it off. That's a very common practice, and it generally speeds the skis up. So that underlines how important it is in the very cold snow when you're using blue to try to remove all of the wax from the surface of the base. It speeds the skis up. So there are a couple brushes still that I haven't mentioned. One is the one I did mention was the white all-purpose nylon. We also have a combi brush. This is a brush for someone who doesn't want to buy this one and the white nylon one. I think, I want a brush, but I don't want to commit to having a brush. So we say, here's a combi brush. And inevitably after buying this, they come back and say, that brush stinks. I want to have a full one of these and a full one of those. And we say, okay. But there's no reason to buy it if you're a waxer, unless you're just getting in and want to dip your toe in. And then the last one, yes?
What about Rotobrushes?
I'm still covering the hand brushes,
Okay.
but we can talk about it. Yes?
So we do, like the blue, we cover it,
Okay.
we hot wax it, and then we scrape it, and then you use the copper again?
Yes.
Oh.
Your copper brush is your utility brush. So after you ski and before you wax, you want to clean your base and open it up kind of a thing so it accepts wax better than if you didn't. And then after you do that, it's really good to take a cloth, like a paper towel, but either the new World Cup polishing cloth or a base text, because they don't have filaments that get all over your base. Wipe your base clean, because there's going to be a bunch of dirt and whatnot. And then do your hot waxing, let it cool, scrape it, and then you hit it with the brush again, and that exposes your structure very well. The copper, again, that's your utility brush. And then, if you're using red or yellow, go with this one, nylon polishing. And if you're going blue, go with this one. Just 1 second, please. I haven't gotten to one brush yet. And actually there's two brushes I haven't gotten to. So this is also, this brush is identical to this brush. Identical except for the color. That was obvious. Identical. The reason we made it yellow, and it has a different name, it's the liquid paraffin yellow polishing brush, is because when you're using liquid paraffins, it's good to have a dedicated brush to finishing them. Because if you're brushing out paraffin, like hot waxes, you get a bunch of it in the bristles, and it's actually slower, and you'll coat your liquid paraffin with the paraffin from here, where when using liquid paraffin, it goes on very, very thin with small particles, and it's faster to not contaminate it with the particles of the hot wax. So we made it yellow so you can dedicate it simply to liquid paraffins. And we do have one more brush I don't have with me and I didn't mention, but it is a viable brush. Those that are interested in that. It's brand new now. It just made it into a warehouse. It's just being shipped out to people. It's the fine, extra fine steel brush. Has anyone heard about that? Or I just did an e-blast about that.
I love that brush.
Okay.
Although I use a switch version.
So it's not the same necessarily. They're made in a different country with different metal and everything. But there's two specific uses for that brush. One use is if you're skiing in snow that's dirty or wet, it's very important to expose your structure, especially important. Or if it's cold, like this morning, it's also important, as I mentioned before, with people putting their skis out in the cold and using this to get rid of all your wax and expose your structure. And that's one use for that extra fine steel brush, but it's different. The bristles are very sharp, and for that reason, you use it differently. With a normal brush, you'd use kind of a brushing motion like this. I usually brush in thirds or halves, depending, like this. And so you're actually working the brush. With the extra fine steel brush, it's very, very sharp, and you have to be careful. You just do this. 3 light passes, tip to tail, and keep in mind that you don't need to work the bristles. You don't need just 3 or 4 light passes, and you'll get everything you're looking to get done with that. And that's only in those conditions I mentioned. There's another purpose for that extra fine steel brush, and that is for cleaning. If you're skiing, especially in the spring, you've got a kick wax, clister, pine pitch, dirt on the surface of the snow, maybe piston bully, transmission fluid on the snow, whatever it might be. It's important to have a clean base, because a clean base is far faster, especially in dirty snow, because the dirt will stick to the dirt that's on the base or the fluid. So what I recommend doing is applying wax remover to the base and then brushing through it with your extra fine steel brush. Again, not just the way I showed you, passively, but it's so sharp, it'll free up that dirt very quickly and easily, and then take some Base Tex and scrub it off. Get rid of that dirt. Yes, please.
Just a quick question about that brush. I don't know how Toko's designer, but the switch has, it looks like nylon around the outside.
We do that as well.
Yeah.
That's so you don't scratch the crap out of your when your brush is coming onto the base. You can sometimes it's not as clean. It's not perfectly parallel to the direction you're going in, and it's not as clean. So if we put that nylon around the ring, it prevents kind of sideways bristle scratches, if you will. That's why we do that. Yes, please.
Ian?
Sorry.
Assuming I do a decent job scraping after hot waxing, how do you, to me it's always been a guessing game on when do I switch from the copper to the nylon.
So first off, a question that's very common that I'll address at the same time is, how much do I scrape and how much do I brush? My ski bases are flat. They're flat. And so when I scrape, I don't have holes. I don't have areas that are not getting scraped. Some people have concave and some people have convex bases. And that creates a challenge because the more you scrape, the more you're scraping into your base in one part and the other part's not getting scraped. So if you're not willing to get your bases flat by getting them stone ground, then you scrape less and you brush more. And a copper brush will get that wax off. You just need to use the elbow grease. So that's a comment I want to make. And that also has to do with your question, I think, which was how much do you brush with the copper before going to nylon? So this is directly related. If your bases are flat, then you would have removed more wax with the scraper before starting your brushing. Whereas if they're not flat, you need to do way more brushing with the copper. But for the most part, I stop brushing with the copper when I'm not getting a significant amount of wax. And when at that point, then I switch to the, depending on which wax I'm using, either the horsehair or the nylon. Yes, please.
You didn't mention brass brushes.
Well, other companies have brass, we have copper. The copper brush, I don't know if you've ever seen one, but you'll see it's a metal brush that does everything you want a metal brush to do, but it doesn't do the things you don't want a metal brush to do. And there are things you don't want a metal brush to do. You notice how soft that is?
Yes.
The things you don't want a metal brush to do. I've been doing this for a while, like many of you. Before we had stone grinding, we had a protocol for working on new skis. And I had a brass brush and a bronze brush. And one part of that protocol after sanding and metal scraping and then sanding was applying a very fine structure to my skis by using a bronze or a brass brush. That creates hair. If it's creating a structure in your base, it's creating hair. We don't want that, especially this morning. We don't want that. This will not do that. So you're not going to create structure on your base using the copper brush, but at the same time, you're not creating structure in your base using copper brush. We have other tools for that. So that's what you want, is a brush that removes the wax out of the structure reasonably efficiently, while at the same time not creating hair or other types of problems. Yes, please.
How do you get the wax out of the brush?
Great question. This is a brush I've been using. I've been doing a lot of pair of skis this last 10 days. Looks kind of like a mess a little bit, but it's fine. This is this brush, if you can't tell.
Wow.
These are the same brush. That's the copper brush. If I do, if I do this, you can see blue wax going up in the air. As far as I'm concerned, there are no issues. It's not dirty. This wax is not a problem. It's light. When I'm waxing, there are no issues. In the spring, there is a problem because I'm using yellow wax predominantly, and there's so much grease, fat, grease, oil in the yellow wax that when I do this, maybe some chunks fly off, but outside of that, nothing's coming off. It's almost like wet, especially if the wax room's warm, and dirt sticks to it. And that's an issue. In the spring, it becomes problematic, but that same brush, whatever it is, 8 months later in the fall, when you're using a lot of blue, suddenly gets all dry again like this brush, and the dry wax soaks up the oil and what was the yellow, and then it becomes cleaner again. So for me, the issue really is, can you make it through the spring with your fatty, greasy, oily brush? Because you've been using a lot of yellow. And if you only live in an area where you're using predominantly yellow, in that case it's more difficult. I would switch brushes out more often. But for me, what I do, I have a race brush and a training brush. And after a year or two, my race brush, which I don't use as often, becomes my training brush, and I might get a new brush. And it's the copper brush is the one by far that gets replaced more. I don't need to really replace the other brushes. They last a long, long time and they stay clean. It's the copper brush. So it's not like I'm saying you need to buy new brushes all the time. This would be my utility brush that I'm using every day. If I'm racing and I want to have then I'll use a newer race brush that I only use when I'm doing race skis and not my training skis kind of a thing most of the time. And if I'm working on my training skis on a regular basis, then it's not a big deal if it's a little red. So that's kind of what I recommend. Yes, please.
Do you hesitate to use the same brush for cleaning and then post-waxing?
Not at all.
Metal brushes?
Not at all. Previous to this year, we didn't have that extra fine steel brush, and we're using the same copper brush for the cleaning on top of the wax remover as well. And that didn't cause any challenges. I would use my utility training, the one I use every day for that purpose, and there's no issues. Just 1 second. Yes, please.
You mentioned wax remover. Back in the day, we used a pretty heavy solvent.
Yeah.
Do you have a wax remover product?
So the wax removers, and not just ours, but basically all wax removers on the market today, they're not all the same, but there's nothing in common with them compared to what the wax removers were in the 80s and 90s. Those were more or less paint thinner, turpentine, etc. Anyone want to look at this? Sorry?
Common white fuel.
Yeah, exactly. It's very benign. Does anyone else want to check this out? They're very benign. It barely smells. They remove less wax, but they still remove wax. It's a whole different animal compared to the what I grew up with, which was toxic.
Well, that's
So-
still burn.
Yes. Yeah. But there's a big difference between. I mean, it's got isopropyl alcohol in it. That's a very different animal than gasoline.
So what did you just put it on?
This is a base tex, or also known as fiberline.
Okay.
It depends on same product.
Is that a citrus product?
No, this is it's called HC3 wax remover. It's our main wax remover. Did you check this out? You can see it's, sorry? What was the question?
It was, could you clean your brush with the wax remover?
Yeah, you can, but I don't think that's productive necessarily. The only brush I would consider cleaning is this one. That's the only brush I would consider cleaning. And like I said, what I do is I have a dedicated training brush, and then I have one that's in better shape, and I don't think it's a big deal. There's a lot of questions at the same time. Excuse me if I don't get you in the right order, but you had a question next.
Yeah, historically, mill brushes, copper brushes, steel, et cetera, you had to only brush in one direction for the life of the brush. Is that still the case?
I think that has more to do with the brushes that can get angled. So once they start to get angled, then if you use them in the other direction, they're far more aggressive. And then they can get ratty if you use them in different directions, which I have no problem doing. But you can put an arrow on one, but that makes it more directional. So for example, it's more for alpine, but we have an oval brush with steel bristles that are much longer. The longer a bristle, the less aggressive it is. So if that same brush had short bristles, it'd tear the heck out of the base. But because it's got very long bristles and it's leaned over about 20% angle, and it's got a big arrow on it using this direction, it makes it less aggressive. So that's a utility brush that we usually detune first, which is a little advanced, but the point is simply unidirection versus not. For sure, on the non-metal brushes, you don't need to worry about it. I use my metal brushes in both directions, but they probably last less long doing that because they get kind of spread in every direction. But at the same time, I don't personally want to have a brush that's one of these that's all leaned over one direction because I find it makes it less effective. Yes, please.
What about a snowboard?
Did you say snowboard?
Do you need that brush for a snowboard? Will it work on a snowboard?
Any of these brushes will work on a snowboard, but we also have fatter oval brushes that have, for alpine and snowboard, that have a greater surface area. And the oval brushes have a horse strap, is what many people call it, a strap in the back,
Right.
so that you can brush without exposing your fingers to a metal edge. But they also have a more of surface area, so you can crank through a snowboard quicker.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily productive to use them on one of these because these are only so wide.
There's some competitors that have like they say put dry cleaner on and then your liquid. I don't really understand every time, dry cleaner, liquid. Do you know what that's about? And is Toko better than that? Is it something you don't want? What's that all about?
It's a good question. The question is wax remover versus a so-called glide cleaner that's got paraffin in it. I've been a proponent. I personally don't see a downside to using a glide cleaner with paraffin in it. And I've been experimenting with that for quite a while. Our base performance liquid paraffins are in a base of isopropyl or isopropyl alcohol. That is a solvent, and they do work as a wax remover. Not exactly the same as this, but they do work quite well as a wax remover. And so I've been experimenting with that in the spring when I've been skiing on dirty snow. And it looks better after. So I'll do one ski with this, I'll put it on the base, copper brush it, and then use a lot of elbow grease, like push down real hard with this. Usually I'll have a cork or a thermal pad underneath it and really scrub it, and you get a lot of dirt out. Or you can even use even one of the base performance,
Nice catch.
you can even use one of the base performance liquid paraffins and do the same thing. Spray it on, hit it hard with the copper brush, and then afterwards scrub it pretty hard just with the base text. And I've found that the effect is pretty similar because it does have a solvent in it. But the one that I used with this it's more appealing looking because there's a little, actually that's not even the right product, this one. There's a little thin layer of paraffin in there. So it looks more appealing, but in either case, as soon as I do a layer of any kind of hot wax, there's no difference, they're the same. But in terms of the showroom appeal, it looks better with this, and I've done my part within the Toko company to suggest that we have a solvent with some paraffin in it for that purpose, because some people have gotten used to using the line cleaner with the paraffin in it, and it looks good. I can tell you on the World Cup though, that's not something that is done much at all. No one uses it at all. But in the recreational end, even in the domestic race, some people like the fact that the base doesn't look as dried out. But I can tell you, this stuff doesn't really dry a base out, this stuff. It just looks better. So that's kind of where I'm at in that, and I have nothing against it. Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think you know Terry Tansey's sealing.
Yeah.
It's an innovative way of cleaning copper brushes. He uses a commercial vacuum with the tube. Runs them over it several times.
Vacuum cleaners work great for cleaning brushes.
It is a great way to do it.
Yeah, they do work great. They work better at cleaning brushes when they've got blue in them as compared to when they have yellow in them. But one thing you can do is either wait for it to get cold or hot wax a ski with blue and brush it out. And then the vacuum cleaner will be much more effective in sucking out the particles because the blue will soak up some of that oil. But that does work well, vacuum cleaner. There were a bunch of hands here and there. Yes, please.
I want you to talk a little bit about the express wax for those of us lazy.
Great. Okay. So the express wax line, we have an express wax line where we have a rub-on, liquid, some people call it liquid rub-on, and then we also have a paste, and then there's another product I'll show you. And the idea behind these is simply for those that want to do no work. They understand that it's not the same speed and quality of the more expensive, perhaps more time-consuming waxes, but they're appropriate for recreational skiers.
Not a competitive wax.
Not a competitive wax, but they're a great. I mean, some people. Toko, actually, it wasn't Toko. It was the Swiss. Wasn't the racing like USSA version in Switzerland, but Swiss ski tourism, or in Switzerland they did a study where they did a poll to millions of skiers, and they ascertained that and most of these are alpine skiers, but less than 5% of skiers in Switzerland, when they did this poll, which was about 15 years ago, wax their own skis.
Mm.
And they went, holy crap. And all people do is they put nothing on them, or they take it to the shop once, twice, 3 times a year and say, hey, do what you got to do. I want to have my skis that are better performing. And then we took that information and said, okay, what can we do? Say someone walks into a ski shop and they say, I don't want to deal with this stuff. You do it. And the ski shop says $80. And they're like, okay. And then they say, what's that stuff over there? And then they say, oh, that's a ski wax. It's an express wax. It's different from hot waxing, but it works pretty well. And they say, well, how much does that cost? Oh, that's $10. And then this one. And then they say, oh, well, how many pair do you get out of that? And it's like, oh, 30 pair of skis. And they say, well, what the heck am I?
Why am I paying?
Exactly. So there's kind of a customer for everybody. You know, we want to give people options. And that's what the express waxes are about, is giving someone an option, even though it's not necessarily the same as this, but the price point's different, and it's also a viable option compared to just bringing it to the shop once in a while and letting them do what they do, because that's not very effective, having your skis hot waxed once a year. You know, this is probably using this regularly is better than that. So, so we have, these apply super easy. There's alcohol in here, and the alcohol has got paraffin dissolved in it. There's a little plunger. The plunger gets pushed down, and then the wax comes out into the sponge. And it goes on the ski very quickly and easily. You can see it right here, like a little stripe. But if I were to have taken 5 more seconds, it's evaporating so quickly, it's basically gone now. And it leaves that little bit of paraffin. So that's what this is. And it works decently, it's very popular. You can put it in your pocket. And especially if the snow gets a little sticky, you want a little more glide, you throw that on and it's great. And it doesn't need to go, it's gone, it's ready to ski on. Yes?
It's great to have in your pocket for when you're teaching.
Yeah.
If somebody shows up with skis that are
Nasty ski.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It saves, it's safe.
Definitely.
You can do this right before you ski.
Right before you ski. In the parking lot, on the snow. You saw how long it took. It's ready to ski on. So there's another formula of this. So we have this in 3 sizes. 75 millimeter, 100 milliliter, and then a can for 200 for like rental shops. This is called Grip and Glide Wax. It's intended for no wax skis. So fish scales, tread pattern, step skis, there's a whole bunch of different words for the same thing. What's inside it is identical. There's no difference whatsoever. But this has got alpine skier and a backcountry skier in the front. And this one's got Nordic skiers. And this one has the directions for making alpine skis faster. And this one explains that for fish scale skis, you apply it in the entire bottom surface of the ski, on the running surface, as well as in the tread pattern. So it's more, let's say, consumer friendly in that it explains the product better. But they're identical in every way except for the stickers.
So these guys are better used consistently as opposed to once or twice a year waxing.
They don't go into the base. There's no hot waxing going on, but it does make the skis slipperier.
Protects.
Yep, and with no wax skis, it helps prevent the sticking of the snow to the tread pattern. That said, this isn't magic wax. If a person's got a pair of skis with a fish scale or step pattern on it, and the step pattern has been grip waxed, some people think that's a good idea to throw some grip wax on there sometimes, or they've been skiing on dirt, and they have a bunch of dirt in their tread pattern, this is going to help minimally. Because the dirt, when it's 32 degrees and new snow, that dirt will be a magnet to that new snow. So before this being truly effective, you need to take a brush and some wax remover, or what I recommend starting with is soapy water and a brush, nylon brush, and scrub the crap out of those fish scales so that, especially in the corners, the dirt's gone. And then this will work. But as long as there's dirt in there, this is only so effective. So that's an important point, especially for your ski instructors.
Question, how do you know that the top level is faster than the second top level? Do you have metrics on percentages, or do you weight down a ski and drag it and take metrics on it? What do you do to really know?
So there's a ton of R&D that goes into all these products. And what we usually do is we release them to the World Cup before they're introduced and released to the consumer market. So these products, and there's actually 3 more that are block form, these were used extensively on the World Cup last winter. And then we get feedback. Here's some examples. You see what they look like? This is what they looked like the last year. Blue, red, and yellow. And you can see a lot number. And the lot numbers are all different because they're different formulas. And we'll test 25 different formulas and then pick one and then say, okay, what was different about that one? And then know what the difference was, and then use that to pick 25 more different ones, and then choose 1 or 2 from them, and so on. And then once we've gotten to that point, and then also in blue, red, and yellow, and also in the powders, same deal. These are all test powders with lot numbers, etc. And those will be tested not only in the United States last winter, but in ski halls in the summer and at all World Cup events, which are tons of different countries and continents through the winter. And then once that's all been done, we say, okay, we're gonna see what we do here. We're gonna introduce it to the World Cup. And so the different countries, all the different countries in Alpine, Nordic Combined, Cross Country, Biathlon, they all have the opportunity to buy these products and to use them in their races trying to get medals. And we get then direct feedback from the market as to whether they're effective or not, because they're using products from all these other companies, brands, as well as products that we've already had in the line that have existed for years. And we get immediate feedback. And another thing they also do is they play with application method. So and that makes a huge difference when you're talking about,
Yeah,
sorry?
no, that's, who's using it, how are they using it?
You're asking that now?
No, I'm saying the feedback that you're getting.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a part of the
Yeah.
feedback.
And so there's no better testing or proving ground than the World Cup and all these different disciplines. And we get very direct, strong feedback. And so,
By lot numbers.
yeah, everything. And then once we're satisfied that the World Cup, and we were super strong, as I mentioned, with these products last year, then we bring them to the market.
What I'm hearing is it's based on the feel from elite skiers. Is that what you're saying?
So different teams have different protocols and testing protocols, and they also look for different things in different conditions. But generally speaking, things have morphed from using speed traps, which was probably most common in the 90s, using speed traps where you test in a track and you go again and again switching skis, and you'd have a protocol, let's say 8 pairs, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, because oftentimes the track speeds up the more it gets skied in, which is the problem. And if there's a puff of wind, it screws everything up, because the wind has an effect generally bigger than the difference in the waxes. They went from that to taking 2 or so testers, generally 2 testers of a similar weight, and they're used to testing together, and they'll do glide outs next to one another, and then they ski back up and compare feel, and they're all blind tests, so no one knows what's on the skis at all. They have no clue, and they just say 6A, good, 6B, they rate them, and they also will compare them, let's say 6 with 4, and then one of them wins, and one rider will run on 6 and one will run on 4, and then they switch, and they compare them again. And then they'll pick a winner, and then it's like a bracket, like a tournament bracket, and eventually 6 is again going up against 2 and 3, the winner 2 and 3, and then see if 6 and 2, etc. That's the way they work it. It takes hours and it's hard work, but it's very important, because if you don't, and they do the same with structure, and in some cases they do the same with base material and flex. It's very complicated, time consuming, and then going into a World Cup event, they're doing this starting at like 5 in the morning for a 9 o'clock start. And of course, the conditions have nothing to do with what they had, nothing to do with the way they are at the start, but that's just what they go through. And then it might start snowing 15 minutes before the start, and the whole thing's blown to hell. And they're winging it, But that's more or less how it works. And then they're scrambling, waxing all the skis the last minute when they finally made their call. Structure, flex structure, and wax. It's tricky.
Yeah, I noticed when you, sorry to ask another
No,
question.
no problem.
When you sprayed it on, I could smell paraffin from here. And that's kind of a little bit reluctant to take on that as a wax. I like glide wax, paste waxes, because you don't smell anything. There's no sense that I'm breathing anything in.
Yeah, so there's paste waxes, and there's a solvent in the paste wax.
Yep.
And you're not just sticking your nose in it, but it's a solvent. If it wasn't for the solvent, then it wouldn't go on the ski as easy as it does. And we also have rub-on solids, which I don't have here, but it's basically a paraffin in a...
So you have a paraffin paste wax. Is that
a paraffin rub-on that you just rub on the ski, and then it's got a cork on the packaging, and you just cork it like that and ski on it. That's a popular.
That sounds like the healthiest option of all.
Sure, and this particular wax is also natural wax. It's made from carnauba mostly. We get it out of the plant. It sublimates out of the plant. We don't even apply much heat. It just comes off the leaves.
I don't know what carnauba is, but I take it.
Latin America
plant.
Yeah, it's kind of like palm, one of them.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, but, so we also have natural waxes, both in this formula as well as in, we call it performance speed.
Thanks for
natural
that.
speed. Yeah, sorry, just
How does the powder wax get applied?
the powder.
Yeah.
So we have a few different powders and they all get applied similarly. They all have high melting temperatures. So every wax we make, every hot wax we make, or every wax that gets heated, has a picture, a small picture. Pictograms are great because they're not language dependent. So instead of saying iron temperature, we just have a picture of an iron, very small one. And then next to it is a temperature, both in Fahrenheit and in Celsius. And that's the recommended iron temperature. And powders generally have a higher melting temperature than some of the other waxes. But you just put it on the base. Some powders go on more than others depending on if it's, for example, one of these. They go on, you put on less than one of these. I'm going to spill some, but you can see. Can you see the base? Mm-hmm. Somewhat like that. And that might look like a lot, but this isn't a perfluorocarbon like we had some years ago where you'd use less. This is a paraffin or a synthetic mixed with a paraffin, and then you'd iron it. You'd hot wax it much like you'd hot wax other waxes, but in an effort to not have the wax plow off the ski, our iron has graduation in the back, such that you can wax it like that. I always wax backwards. I'm not sure where the graduation's in the front, but I always wax rear to front, like with this. So again, I'm not sure why we didn't just flip it around, but I always wax like this. And what you can do is tamp it down. So just go like this, your first time down. And because it's heated, it's not falling off the ski, it just flattens it, and then take pass like that. And you don't lose the wax, it doesn't go anywhere, it's effective.
What is the benefit of the powder over a block?
So this product is called X-Cold Powder. It's one of our most popular powders. It's fantastic wax. On the race service level, I've been working for Toko for years, we used to make it in blocks. And one thing, it was hard for the production crew to make it so that it didn't work. For some reason, when we put this in a block, we'd pour it into a mold. So it would be in liquid form, pour it in a mold, and then it would warp for whatever reason. But the other problem we had is, if it ever fell, it'd shatter in 1,000 pieces. And that's not convenient at all. So we decided to make it in a powder. And I've been working for Toko for years. We've had a similar formula on this for a long, long time. It's one of our absolute best waxes. One thing you might find interesting is we've had a new product manager. I've worked for Toko for about 25 years now. We've had probably 7 product managers during my time working there. And what pretty much every product manager has done, when they start on this product, they say, we should make this in balls. And they change it to balls, and then they put it on the ski and it falls off the ski. And then I say, you gotta make it in very, very small, like sand or flakes. But it can't be balls because it's going to roll off the ski. And then after having that happen the first 3 times we had new product managers, every time we get a new product manager now, I say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And I say, hey, don't make this a ball. Keep it. And we sell more of this than some of the other waxes too, than the rest of the world combined, because we have much drier, colder snow. We know how to use it. And so they don't have a clue, so they're not using it. It's not falling off their ski. They barely use it in the Alps because it's so much wetter. So that's a struggle, but that's powders.
What is that product?
This is X-Cold Powder.
X-Cold.
Yeah. X-Cold Powder is very, very good. If you were to ask a US ski team technician which Toko product you use the most, they would tell you these, and a lot of them use these products for sure, but every single one of them uses this when they're racing in the United States, and then in certain arid or dry areas of Northern Europe or in Asia. It is used, the name X-Cold Powder implies that it's for very cold weather. That's wrong. It's almost right, but it's wrong. Almost right is wrong as far as I'm concerned. It should be used in cold, dry snow that is, the most important word I'm going to say now is slow. Cold, slow dry snow or cold, slow snow. That's when you want to use it. And I'll just give an example. So let's say let's say I'm talking about this, which is a high performance blue, but it can be any of the blue waxes. Any wax like that, that's a hot wax, is a sweet spot. Toko's had the best hot waxes for cold for decades. I'm really happy with them. So this wax has got a sweet spot. Let's say it's like this. So here's warmer, colder, the blue, that's the sweet spot. Great. What do we do when it's here? That's cold, slow snow. In cold, slow snow, and that's how I define cold snow, not by the temperature, but how slow it is. That's really important to think about. So when it's cold, slow snow, I'll use this by itself. And as we get to the sweet spot of this stuff, I'll mix them. And then I'm not using anymore. I don't care if it's minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's slow, we're using it. If it's not so slow, we're not using it. What this does is it greatly improves the breakaway speed of a ski. The point at which it accelerates. It greatly improves that. And then, on the other end, so I got the curve. This is cold, slow snow. This is cold, average speed snow. This is cold, fast snow. We don't need to worry about breakaway speed. It's like icy, refrozen ice, corn snow that's really cold. We mix yellow in with the blue. And what that does is it gives the skis a super high end speed. So you go down the hill, it'll give you 10 miles an hour faster end speed. Whereas if you had this, it's minus 10 degrees, I don't care how cold it is, and it's super fast, you put this in, it's going to slow the end speed down. You mix this in, it's going to make it faster. That's what I meant about the simplicity and the nuances. So we only have a few waxes, but there are nuances that really make the waxes fast if you know them. Yes, please.
How do you apply the paste wax, express wax?
So we have two different ones. I had that the other day and I didn't bring it here, but they're both pretty similar.
The tube.
Okay, it's close enough. They're both close enough. I'm going to use this, but the tube's even easier. The tube's got a sponge applicator, so you squeeze it out and it comes to a hole in the sponge, and you just go like that, and the sponge spreads it onto the ski. And so the effect is the same. Whereas if I take this and I just put some of this on this base text and I wipe it on the ski, so I've got this on the ski. You can see there's wax on there. I've got two choices. The one I prefer, just do this in the parking lot or right before I ski, and I put it on the base like that, and then I buff it immediately. I've used our paste more than anyone in the world, I guarantee that. And that's how I want to have it. It's shiny. There's a micro layer of paste on the base. You use less than the second option. It's shiny and it's fast right out of the gate. And that's all you got to do. And you can do that in the parking lot with either this one or the one in the tube. They're different products, but they both get applied similarly. The other option is the one that I don't do as much and I don't think is as effective, but it's the one that's recommended on the packaging. That's because the people that recommend it didn't use it as much as I did. And that is, they put it on like this, and then let it sit until it dries completely, and then they brush it out. But what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish a micro thin uniform layer of glide wax. And that's what you get when you do this.
How long will that last?
Perfect. It depends very much on the conditions. In non-abrasive snow, 30K, easy. It's very, very good. In abrasive snow, much less. I saw it. Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, within the high performance wax line, someone asked, well, what's the difference between the hot wax and the powder, the regular powders, not the X-Cold?
That's a great question. I've asked our chemist that a few times because they're both hot waxes. But the ingredients are different, and I don't understand. I've asked him probably 10 times last year why we didn't just make the ingredients that are in the powder in the hot wax. Like, what's preventing that? And I wasn't able to get a satisfactory answer. And it's a good intellectual question, but from my perspective, these waxes are now obsolete. Not that one, the X-Cold, but these ones. Because these are racing products. They were our fastest waxes last year at US Nationals. Almost every elite team used them in almost every single race at Soldier Hollow last year at US Nationals. Almost every single team used them in almost every single race. These products. And at this point, I can say these products were not used in the World Cup last year. I didn't have these products, and the World Cup did. I had these, and the teams were like, wow, that's fantastic. They were testing everything, and they were their fastest waxes of everything they were testing. And now, as far as I'm concerned, they're obsolete because these are faster. So there's no point in having them in the line, and they're going to be eliminated from the line as soon as we get rid of them. It's great stuff. I have them on our closeout sheet on TokoUS.com. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're obsolete. I need to make room for this, and I don't want to misrepresent anything. So the product is great, but I believe in our mission, which is not our mission, but our identity, which is simplicity. And these are going to go away. They'll be deleted or eliminated from the line as soon as we can afford to do that, which means we need to move the product. Yes, please.
Could you touch on Rotobrushes and
Yeah.
Rotobrush versus airbrush?
So we've got currently 3 Rotobrushes in the Toko line. Brushes. So we have a merino roller, and we have a felt roller as well for applying some of these waxes, and also a block that's going to be up here shortly. These are not Rotobrushes maybe, but they're Roto products. But in terms of Rotobrushes, we've got 3 currently. We've got a steel, and we've got one, I guess I don't have here, but it's the horsehair, but it doesn't look like this black horsehair at all. It looks more like a natural, and it's stiff and aggressive, but no metal. And then we have the yellow nylon. I don't recommend this one, which is the steel. You can ruin a pair of skis very quickly. On the World Cup, these are used quite extensively in all disciplines, if a person's a Rotobrush person, but they detune them. These are sharp, and you can ruin skis with them very easily. Technicians will put them in put a metal scraper in a vise, and then run it against the metal scraper, whacking it against the scraper and fraying and dulling the edges, the ends of these. Whereas right now, the ends of these filaments are very sharp. And if you're using 800 RPMs and pushing down, you just ruin skis very quickly and easily. Yeah, terrible.
Lots of hair.
So I don't recommend this. It's used more in Alpine, and it's used by World Cup technicians who have detuned it. The horsehair, which is more of a utility brush, is the one that would use after you've scraped. And that's the brush you would use, and then you'd finish with this one, which is a softer nylon brush, which you'd finish with. We are going to come out with a copper brush, a copper Rotobrush next year, which I would then recommend, but I don't recommend this one yet. So it'll be a year until we have that. Something I did years ago was, I'm always testing stuff, and I decided to test Rotobrushes compared to hand brushes. I've always been a proponent of hand brushes. I can brush skis very quickly using the combination of brushes I mentioned to you, very, very quickly. And so what I did was I'd have an A and a B. All my skis, okay, these don't, but all my other skis say A and B on them because I'm always testing. And I did my B brushes for a month only with Rotobrushes, my B ski, and my A ski I did for a month only with hand brushes. And I was skiing on them pretty much for the whole month and finishing them. And at the end of the month, the B skis, you could see that the wax retention wasn't consistent. Even though the bases were flat, there was more wax in the middle than there was in the edges. There was some bad effect from the friction from the Rotobrushes. And I wasn't necessarily pushing down. I was doing everything the way I'm supposed to do it. But the hand brush skis were perfect looking, and the Rotobrush skis didn't look very good. Additionally, for a race prep, if I finish a pair of skis with, let's say, this brush, we had a slightly longer brush at that time, you can see the slap marks on the base from the brush. Whereas if you use a hand brush, you can't see that, and I don't like that. That said, last winter I was doing some testing, and I found that the Rotobrushes have improved. And I wasn't getting that effect. And I also know many World Cup techs that use almost exclusively Rotobrushes with great success. So I guess the moral of the story for me is there are multiple ways to get to the same spot. And I prefer hand brushes. I can finish them just as fast as someone using Rotobrushes, just as cleanly, just as well. But I know people using Rotobrushes do a great job and know their craft, and it's kind of sixes, you know?
It takes time to develop that craft though with the roto brushes.
For sure.
You
Yep.
don't just do it like you would a hand brush and it comes out.
No
the same
question.
way.
Yep. Yes, please.
Said you mix the hard blue, I'm going back, mix the hard blue with the yellow. How do you mix it?
Oh, yeah, in fast, cold snow. In fast, cold snow, the faster it is, the more yellow. You know, so we got that bell curve where the blue is very good. If it's cold and slow, then we're mixing the X-Cold in, and I'll talk about that for a sec. And then if it's normal speed, you're just using the blue. And if it's fast and cold, like refrozen ice, corn snow, etc., then you're mixing it with yellow. The way that's done, I'll start with this one. You do a bead of blue down the ski, or one of those down the ski, and then you do an equal one or yellow, and that'd be all 50-50. You know, it's not an exact science. And then you melt them in together.
Iron them in together.
Yes. However, when it comes to these, there's a mistake that's very commonly made. That's the X-Cold powder mixing it with the blue, which you can use the X-Cold powder by itself, and then as it's not super squeaky, super slow, you might want to mix it with the blue as we're getting closer there. The mistake that people make is they drip the blue on, and they take the iron and flatten it out, and then they shake the X-Cold on. And what happens is the blue stays on the bottom and the X-Cold stays on the top. And you're pretty much just pissing it, yeah. And so the way to do that is to put some drips of the blue down, or a line, a bead of the blue, and then the X-Cold, and heat them in together, and then it mixes properly. We've got what I think is quite a bit still to talk about that I thought you'd be interested in, but the questions have been excellent. So, and our time, I'm fine going longer, but our time is theoretically up, which is bad because we haven't talked about a lot of very basic or interesting things. You mind if how are we looking?
Yeah.
I'm totally.
Yeah, grip wax.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot to talk about still. One very important thing to talk about is glide and grip wax selection. So briefly, Toko grip wax line, and we're not getting specifically into grip now, but this is the entire hard wax grip wax line that we have. This one is for very cold conditions. Most people don't necessarily need that. They'd be very happy with a blue. So you're looking at a binder or a base wax and 3 temperature sensitive waxes. That's very little. It's a very small offering. Our philosophy is, let's say you look at last year and you look at what you waxed with all year last year, you probably could say 90% of the time I used one of 4 waxes. That's this. That's what we're trying to capture. We don't care to be the one that used once in a blue moon and extra special conditions. This is what we're trying to capture. And I have personally seen multiple World Cups won on this and on this. Multiple World Cups. And this is a very special wax, the blue, the base green binder. So my point is, that's the concept behind our grip waxes. Wax selection for both grip and glide. It's much more than what we want to think it is. So we have our suggested air and snow temperatures written on here, on all the waxes, as well as on all our grip waxes, suggested air and snow temperatures. Unfortunately, they're very inaccurate. And you can't say, well, make them accurate. That's not how it works. Snow temperature is more accurate than air temperature, but what are we trying to learn? What are we trying to learn when we actually look at the snow temperature? First off, why is snow temperature more accurate than air temperature? Anyone got something to throw at me?
Surface of the ski is in contact with the snow.
Let's say it's this morning. This morning it got down to -3 degrees. This afternoon, it got up to 36? 36. Do the snow and the air warm at the same speed? No. The air warms faster than the snow. That's a problem because when we're looking at snow temperature or air temperature, what are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out how much free moisture is in the snow. That's the main thing we're trying to figure out. And so, is there more free moisture in the snow when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit or when it's 35 degrees Fahrenheit? It's a no-brainer, right? When it's 35, there's more moisture in the snow. It's more free moisture in the snow. So that's what we're really trying to figure out when it comes to air temperature and snow temperature. If we're keen on air temperature, the air warms faster than the snow. So let's say this morning it was -3 degrees. At 10 a.m., let's just say it was 20 degrees. Let me use a better example. Let's say at 8 a.m. it was 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and at noon it was 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The air temperature at noon that said 35 degrees is different from the snow. At noon, the snow probably would still be around 15, 17 degrees max, because it warms so much slower. And that is the important number because you want to figure out how much moisture is in the snow. You want to figure out, am I using red or blue or yellow? If I'm looking at the thermometer and it says 35 degrees, I'm using yellow for sure. And I was out there this would have been dragging like crazy, it would have worn off, it would have been sticking, might have been icing up. And that's because the air temperature is so misleading. If I put a snow thermometer in the snow and it said 17 degrees, I'd be probably using this or even the blue, probably a mix of the two. And then I'd be on the right wax. And it's the same with Glide. In addition to the complication of what I just talked about, there are many other factors that you need, if you want to have good skis, to be sensitive to when you are selecting your wax. Example, did anyone ski here yesterday? Did they groom? They didn't. Was the snow fast as snot? Out of the tracks? Mine were. Fast.
Out of track.
Out of the track. Fast. Much faster than out of the track today. Fact? Was the air and the snow about the same temperatures? So there are other factors. Because the faster the snow is, the different wax you want to use. Also for kick, if if the snow in the track was similar to the snow out of the track yesterday, you would have had a hard time getting kick like some people did compared to today. So there are some other factors. Some of the factors include, let's say you want to go for a ski and you're skiing on a 2K loop. You're classic skiing or skating on a 2K loop. AKA, you're in the Midwest. You're skiing on this 2K loop, and you want to have good kick and you want to have good glide. What are you going to do to your wax? Is it going to be harder or softer? Okay, let me rephrase it. Is there more moisture in the surface of the snow on a 2K loop that's being skied on by a million people around? Yes. Or on a point-to-point? Much more moisture in the snow. In the track, it's going to glaze, and probably out of the track, it's going to glaze. There's a moisture film. So what does that mean? You use a warmer wax compared to if you're doing one 20K loop, and it's not being skied on by a lot of people, then you use, comparatively, a colder wax. Yes?
Artificial snow on that equation.
Artificial snow is the same deal. Generally speaking, it's got not only far more moisture in it, but it's also rounder balls of snow as compared to the famous flakes, etc., dendrites that we're familiar with. Also, windblown snow. Windblown snow is dry, right? Dry. Does anyone know what grapple is? If you live in the Intermountain West, you've seen a lot of grapple. It's that styrofoam-looking snow that falls oftentimes around freezing. Grapple is dry. Super dry. It's like styrofoam. So if you are waxing according to air and or snow temperature, and it's grappling on you, you're going to have crap. Your wax is going to ice up, and your glide wax, you should be using blue probably when it grapples instead of the red or yellow you got on your skis. And it's the same with structure. It's the same thing. So there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered. For me, one of the main things, if I'm waxing for a race or I'm making a race wax recommendation, one of the main things that I consider, the question I need answered is it going to glaze or not? That right there, boom. And yeah, temperature plays a role, but also how old the snow is, how much it's been machined, how many people are going to be skiing on it, little loops, big loops, point to point. Is it going to glaze? And then, let's say I got a superstar here, and he's in the lead pack, and it's a point-to-point race. And then I got someone else, who's in the back of 1,000 people in the pack. I'm going to wax them differently, even though they're only starting maybe 5 minutes apart. And they're skiing not very far apart, but there's 1,000 people between them. The snow changes. You have a water film between them. So I'm using blue on one and yellow or red on the other. And I'm using the same thing with Glad. I'm using more structure on his skis and less structure on his skis. I'm using a ski with softer tip on his skis, and on his skis I'm using a stiffer ski with less contact. The temperature is the same. They're only 5 minutes apart, at least in the beginning of the race, maybe. But so my point is there are many more considerations than just the simple temperature. But you understand them, right? It makes sense. Yes.
You said earlier that you had mixed blue and red today for Kicks Wax towards the later part of the day. Are you doing a layer? Or
No,
kind of...
I'm sorry if I said that. I didn't mean to say that. For kick wax, I think I was saying if you went off the air temperature, you would have been using yellow, but you should have been using probably blue or red, depending on exactly the time. I've got a lot more to say, and I know you've got a lot of questions.
Do you ever mix kick wax?
Yes, tons. And not only do I mix, let's say there's a ton. This is an hour and a half by itself. But let's say, I mean, it is, it's a ton. So let's say you're doing the Yellowstone Rendezvous in the spring, a race, but it could be just a training ski, whatever. And you're skiing in the morning such that it's getting warmer. As the sun comes up and blah, 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 it's getting warmer. It's getting warmer. So as it's getting warmer, then I want to have softer wax coming through. I will wax with a binder, and then I'll wax with red, for example, and then I'll cover that red with blue. Why do I do that? Because when I start, it's actually blue conditions. But an hour later, it's red conditions. And if I just go with red, the red's going to be worn off by the cold, abrasive snow, and it might be icing up, and it's going to be slow. But if I cover that red with a thin layer of blue, I'll get through that first hour with reasonable skis, with the harder wax on top, and then the red will start bleeding through as the blue gets worn off, and it gets a little warmer, and I'm skiing on red.
Do you offer a personal waxing service? Might give you some money.
A lot of our ski shops do that, so we stay away from that because it's their domain, so to speak.
So no.
No. Yeah. And there are many other examples of this same thing. If it's snowing, one thing that happens quite often is you have loose snow in the track and you're slipping. There are a few things you can do to get better grip. One is, some people say to wax longer. I reject that because a ski's got camber.
Right there.
A ski's got camber, and you mark your kick zones, and you can make them shorter or a little bit longer, but at some point you make a mark and say, I'm not waxing outside of that because I'm going to be gliding on that and it's going to be dragging. And if you wax longer, you will get kick. And you'll be dragging, and then when it gets worn off very quickly, then you won't have kick anymore. So I reject that. Instead, let's say this is your kick zone, you can do two things. You can wax thicker, or you can wax warmer. If you want more kick, those are your two main options, or you can use skins. But you can wax thicker or warmer. Those are your two options. If I wax thicker, I'll have more of a cushion, and that could give me better kick. If I wax warmer, it's softer, and let's say the snow's glazed or a little wet in the track, more moisture, then that'll work for that reason. But one thing that often works too, also, is if I'm slipping, the snow in the track breaks on itself, what I call shearing. The snow shears. You look behind, or you're skiing behind someone, and you see broken snow. It's not smooth behind them. You see snow that broke under the kick zone. You could wax longer for that if you didn't use your full camber. You'd want to use your full camber for that, or you want to use this pair of skis with a longer kick zone, longer kick pocket, so that there's more contact, so it's less likely to shear. Another option is to use a stickier wax and then cover it with, like I mentioned with the blue and the red a second ago, with a slight layer of harder wax, such that you have a cushion. And that cushion will mean that looser snow will kind of dig in and get more purchase on the snow and won't be as likely to shear. So there's a whole lot to this kick waxing stuff, as well as how thick you put on your binder, when to put your binder on. And this base green binder, we have a lot of secrets and tricks. They're on the YouTube videos, and on our tokovideos.com is a URL that you can sort by recreation, kick waxing, race kick waxing. There's a lot of these secrets on there. They can be used by itself in certain conditions, and you can do the base green sandwich trick, which is on there. That also works very well. I know that there are other things I need to talk about. One is skins. Skins are very popular. Is it okay if I move on to skins? We should have been done. So at some point, throw up a flag or give me the finger or something, and then we'll just wrap it up. But it seems like we've got a mutiny in our hands here. We want. Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, skins. So skins are a great way of getting good kick and reasonable glide if they're fitted properly in difficult conditions. Skins are popular for good reason. They're great. Let's forget about the fit and just talk about treating skins. There's two things that we do with skins, meaning Toko. The first one is proofing, waterproofing skins. We have a product called Eco Skin Proof, and that's to waterproof the skins. Why do we want to waterproof the skins? What's the challenge that a skin offers us where we would want to waterproof it? If the skin becomes saturated, they become matted, and they don't offer any glide, and they don't offer any kick. It's the worst scenario. They're super slow, and they don't kick. And so you want to avoid that. As a track skier, you don't want to avoid your skins becoming saturated. Another thing that can happen to skins, it's less common than that, but it still happens, is the skins can freeze. So there's water in the track, and the sun starts coming down, or something changes, you ski into newer snow, it starts groppling, your skins freeze, and once again, you get no kick and no glide. So that's another bad thing. With that in mind, here's a question for you. If it's 15 degrees, or this morning, is there any reason to waterproof your skins? No, because there's no water in the snow. So there's no point in waterproof. You don't need to use skin proof on your skins when it's dry as a bone and freezing cold. You'd want to use this sometime, maybe starting around, depending on where you're at, New England or some places, the Midwest has some areas that are super humid, even when it's cold, like Houghton and UP, or all the lakes. And in that case, the tracks can get super glazy with an ice water film in the mid-20s. So starting around then is when you want to start using waterproofer on your skins and warmer. How do you use it? The most common thing that I see is someone in the parking lot about to go skiing, has their skins, and take the skin proof, whatever brand it is, and spray it on the skin. Maybe they do what I recommend is run your finger through it so the proof penetrates the skin, and then they put the skis down and go skiing. That's the method, right? That's what everyone does. The problem with that is, what you just did maybe waterproofs the skin about 5%. It's not effective at all. It works a little bit, but not compared to how it should be. We also make waterproofing sprays for technical outdoor wear, like membrane, rain jackets that aren't rain, like Gore-Tex type jackets, windbreakers. It's the same exact concept. The problem is no waterproofing spray out there, silicone-based, fluorine-based. We don't have any fluorine-based anymore, but silicone is the average, the normal one. You spray it on a garment, and it dries. Maybe it dried in 10 minutes. You walk outside the rainstorm, it's going to go right through that damn jacket, unless it is a membrane, but it's not going to work. It's because it takes about 24 hours to fully cure and to become really water resistant. It looks like it's water resistant, until you walk outside. And it's the same thing with the skin. The guy's doing it in the parking lot right before they go skiing. It has almost no effect at all. Whereas, if you come back from a ski, I mentioned this before, it wasn't too popular, but with the liquid paraffin, but you come back from a ski, and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna use my skins, I don't know what the forecast, I'm gonna use them sometime the next month, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. So I'm gonna shoot my skins. Dry your skin off, spray it on there, run your finger through it so it penetrates the skin, and then put them on your rack. They're gonna cure in about 24 hours, fully. I mean, 4 hours works too, but 24 hours is better. And then, no matter when you use them, you can have very waterproof skins. You can use them a month later and it won't lose any effectiveness at all. And they'll be way more waterproof than doing it in a parking lot. Like 20 times more. Yes, please.
How long should that last?
It depends greatly on how dirty and wet the snow is. And abrasive, but dirty and wet. So if it's a total mess, like in the spring when you puddles, it might only last 7 Ks. Whereas if it's not as much of a mess, it'll last a full ski. But it depends greatly on the conditions. Yes?
So if we have a rental fleet of skinsies, and we get new snow in the morning, and we don't want to go through the entire fleet, is there anything that you can do to the skin as you're handing it to someone who's walking out the door?
You can, it's not that effective, but you can rub a paraffin on it and leave it. And that's only so effective. It's not very effective, but it's more effective than nothing. It will pick up dirt, attract dirt. There's another, and this is now, that's all I have for you. You can also, with certain types of skins, you can hot wax them. It's super risky for the skin, and you can ruin your skins and you can ruin the glue that's under the skin, keeping it on the ski. So I've said that really clearly, I think. But you want to put the iron around 100 degrees Celsius, and then you rub the wax on the skin, and you take the iron that's only 100 degrees Celsius, and just run over it. You don't let it sit there. You run over it such that the wax disappears into the skin, and you're done. And that is quite effective. It's more durable than the spray. And it works quite well. The downside to that is it's risky to the skin itself and to the glue, because your skin can peel off the ski because the glue's no longer working. Also, if you have a natural skin that's laid down, it means you don't get any kick if you do that. It only works with the synthetic skins that are mostly at perpendicular. So more the Rossignol, the Monchus, the Atomic, Salmon. But the Fisher twin tips, if you hot wax them, you're not going to get any kick because they kind of makes it even harder to get kicked. Cleaning skins in the spring. Oh, sorry, yeah.
So Ian, do you think the skin skis work as well in artificial snow? Last year at the Berkey, which was as we do all artificial snow, I had very mediocre kick.
What was the air temperature?
Don't remember.
So it was like a week of races, and there were different temperatures, different days. That's what I'm asking. Yeah. So generally speaking, a mechanical grip does not work very well when it's frozen snow because it's hard, and it's hard to then stick into it. But if it's softer snow, then it will work better, generally, unless it's so wet, like it was some of the days of the Berkey where it was very saturated, and then you need to waterproof the heck out of them, because as we said, if it's saturated, you're not going to get kick or glide. So there were we had like 5 days of racing at the Berkey last year, and they were quite different conditions. Okay, for cleaning skins, the problem, the mistake that people make, 5 minutes. The mistake they'll make is spraying the skin cleaner onto the skin, as compared to spraying the skin cleaner onto a cloth, and then wiping the cloth on the skin, tip to tail, tip to tail, tip to tail, tip to tail, until the dirt and cluster and whatnot is gone. That's good, but spraying it on the skin can ruin the filaments of the skin itself, the hairs, depending on natural, there's a bunch of different types that are different sensitivities, and it can make the glue no longer stick. So you lose your skin. So that's the caution. I was also going to talk about structure. In the Intermountain West, You generally want less structure than most skis come with, and than most structure tools offer, and 10 minutes, okay. And fine with me, yeah.
Probably have an hour of questions after that.
So that's something that I caution, is in the Intermountain West, our snow is so dry until mid-February, the sun starts to have an effect, stronger effect is the angle, where it can go into the yellow range very quickly and early, but before that, generally not. You generally want, the factory grinds are for the Alps, and they have far more moisture in the snow, it's transformed. Generally, if you want to have good skis, you want to have a finer structure than your skis come with, and you want to have a finer structure than the recommendations on structure tools, etc. Generally speaking, in the Intermountain West. We have a structure tool. I think, it's great, but I think instead of talking about it a whole lot, it's got blue, red, yellow, temperature ranges are good, it's easy to use. I think what I'd like to do is to use these last 10 minutes to open us up to questions. If you have questions, and if someone wants to learn more about the structure tool, then ask a question about it. Do we have questions? Yes, please.
Do you have a recommended strategy for how to apply iron-on waxes, like
Hot waxing.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. So what I recommend for hot waxing, you can ruin skis hot waxing, but the concept is the hotter you make the base, and for the longer amount of time you make the base hot, the better wax penetration you're going to have. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the hotter you make the base, and for the longer amount of time you heat the base, the higher likelihood of ruining your bases with a bubble and a delam and overheating your base. But it's a fact, the hotter the iron and the longer the exposure, the more the wax penetration, which is great. So we need to balance those two. And what I prefer to do is to keep as many factors the same as possible, such that I have a feel for how hot my base is getting, how much heat the base is exposed to. I mentioned the iron temperatures for each wax I already have on here. So what I recommend doing with the iron is putting it at that temperature and then doing 3 passes. The first pass would be very slow because the base is starting out cool or room temperature. It hasn't absorbed any heat yet. So you can move the iron very, very slowly, 35, 45 seconds from tip to tail, and you can touch it afterwards and it's warm. It barely absorbed heat. So you've made the wax molten, but you haven't heated the base to the point where it's going to expand enough so that the wax is going to get into the base. The second pass I would do about twice as fast. And that's when your base, you get the wax molten, or it was molten, and then the base is expanding to the point because it's absorbing more heat, where you're getting into the base. The third pass is again about twice the speed, about 10 seconds. And that's when you're in the danger zone, but you're also getting the wax in the base. And the reason it's twice as fast again is because that's when you can hurt your base. But that's my recommendation. 3 passes, slow, medium, fast, and then you're good. And you can feel your base after the second or even the third pass, but I even do it after the second pass. Just the back of your hand where it's sensitive. If you can't hold your hand on there for a couple seconds, you've overheated your base too much, and you should move the iron faster. Any more questions? Yes, please.
Will there ever be Toko race wax recommendations for events in Canada?
Ask the Canadians. So I'm responsible for the U.S. I have a team of about 35 people that do Toko race wax recommendations. We're on the ground, boots on the ground. We talk to the groomer. When are you going to groom? Okay, if it snows 2 inches, you're going to groom at 2 in the morning, or you're going to groom right before, We go over the scenarios. We know the local, like the alley loop chase has got this 30K classic. They got this hill at the end with sun exposure where the pack breaks up. You need to have good kick on that hill. We wax for that last lap hill, etc. We have this local knowledge. I don't have a team in Canada. I'm not allowed to ship products to Canada. I'm Toko US. We have a distributor in Canada. They don't do a damn thing. We're looking for new people in Canada, and we'll see what happens there. And I'm glad to help them, but it's tricky because I don't have boots on the ground there. And I take this stuff seriously. I don't just look at a forecast and wing it. The snow type and the the climate, the tendencies of the snow. It's very different. For example, if I look at the United States, most of us from the Intermountain West, if I look at Steamboat, Bozeman, Soldier Hollow as compared to White Pine, Soldier Hollow, to a point Sun Valley, but those three places all have a mountain to the west of the ski area. So the cloud goes like this and hits the mountain and goes up, and then what snows at those three places is drier than what snows somewhere else without a mountain due west of the ski area. And so we know about that local conditions, and we accommodate it, we account for it. And so we don't just do the forecast crap and just take a shot at it like some people do. We know what we're doing. We've got experience doing the same race for 20 years, etc. So that's what we do. Question, yes, please.
Back to your waxing.
Yeah.
Just the physical way to do it. I've seen like 3 different ways to do it. You heat the bar on the iron and then rub it on the ski.
What you're trying to accomplish is getting a certain amount of wax evenly on the ski. So you can rip it, and when you do that, you can do a bead, or you can do a drop, or you can drop in a line, however you want, such that when you're ironing, you want to be able to distribute the wax evenly on the base of the ski and have it thick enough so that you don't have direct iron contact in the base. If there's too little wax, then it's not good for the base. If there's too much wax, it's a waste of money. I'd like to mention something real quick, and that would be, you can go to tokous.com, on the bottom right, click on newsletters, or click here to receive newsletters, and you can select Alpine or Nordic. Every Tuesday during the winter, every Tuesday we send out race wax tips for every race in the United States. And every Thursday we do the race wax tips. And every Tuesday we send out how-to videos, product information, special offers. For example, if something's out of stock, oftentimes I'll write, hey, this is coming in this week, so you'll know you can get it. And all of you can order off of that website at a very good discount because you're PSIA, thank you. So it behooves you to probably key into that. So just go to that website if you're interested, click on Receive Newsletters, Nordic, or you can select both, and you get that information. Yes, please.
My family makes a product called Glob Stopper specifically for AT skins. Do you have a comparable product?
No, is that to make the skin stick better or to keep stuff from sticking to the skin?
The setting.
So that would be our skin proof. But I'm not exactly, I bet it's just a silicone based.
It's a rub-on.
Oh, it's a rub-on.
It's a rub-on rub wax, sticking in your pocket.
So we have an express wax rub-on, it's this product here. And in Europe, that's super popular for rubbing on skins. And they use this paste on the base of the ski, and that doesn't prevent the skin from sticking. And then this on the skin, that's really popular in Europe. That's kind of the magic combo. So I imagine it's quite similar to that.
That's the one that's right there on the table.
This is a natural wax. This would be one of these.
Oh, okay.
But this is, it's more, it's not exactly the same. This comes with a cork on the packaging, and a little different. Any other questions? Yes, please?
Maybe you can't say it, high performance wax versus natural. If you had to, like, how much slower, faster?
So we have natural, universal, so it's like an all temp, one wax for everything. We have natural speed. The natural speed performs about the level of the performance here. About performance.
But it will be slower, much slower?
Definitely slower, yeah. Yep, but I mean, it's all natural waxes. It's a whole different everything. So again, if you wanted to ask me any more questions, you can email me or comment on a video, and I'd encourage you to take advantage of your discount, which is pretty generous. Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you all too for what you do.
One thing before we all go, thank you so much, Ian. Truly appreciate it. Remind us, Ian, if we want to order some Toko wax products, we can go to the PSIA portal, Pro Deals, and all the information should be on there for us?
Yes. And then from there, you go to tokous.com and enter the promo code that is on the PSIA member benefits section, and that's when you get your massive discount.
Beautiful.
So you order on tokous.com, but you get the information for the discount code on the PSIA member benefits page.